Welcome to the world of Aora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello players, and welcome to the world of Aora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. In this show, we aim to dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics of the Pillars of Eternity games to learn about Avowed and gain insights into the game as it undergoes development. For those not in the know, the reason that we are pairing those two games together is because they share the same fantasy world of Aora, and so that's why we're going to take a look at Pillars of Eternity. In the last episode, we took a look at the deity Berath. We looked at what her domains are, or what its domains is, and we looked at what Berath was in charge of. In this episode, we're going to look a little bit more about Berath's personality, as well as the priesthood that's associated with Berath. So, since we have no news to go over, let's dive straight into the lore.
Unfortunate. It will prove much more difficult without someone of your unique talents and circumstances.
She raises her gauntleted hand and gestures to the dwarf hovering at the periphery.
Now, we've talked a bit about Berath and what it is and what it does, but we haven't really mentioned Berath's personality at all. We haven't really talked about what Berath thinks or how Berath likes to behave or what Berath expects of its followers. And this brings me to an important aspect of the Pillars of Eternity games. There is a game mechanic in the Pillars of Eternity games called disposition, and I really hope that they include it in Avowed. I think it would be so well done to have it in that game. But this game mechanic called disposition, it's essentially tying roleplay to impactful game mechanics. This is how it works, and this is going to be a quick overview. So there are 10 dispositions in the game of Pillars of Eternity. And whenever you make a choice or perform an action in the game, or at least some choices and some actions, it's associated to one of these 10 dispositions. As you continuously make choices and perform actions of similar dispositions, you increase your rank in those dispositions. So here's an example. One of the dispositions is deception, being someone who lies. That's the kind of person you are. That's the way you behave. If NPCs walk up to you and they ask you questions, if you are constantly telling lies to these NPCs, you're going to increase your rank in the deceptive disposition. Now, this isn't like leveling up. You don't gain experience. It doesn't add abilities to your character. It just adds different dialogue options down the road, as well as gives your character a reputation for being a deceptive person, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are some criminal organizations that like someone who can lie well to others. But anyways, here are the 10 different dispositions that you can have in a game. Aggression, benevolence, cleverness, cruelty, deception, diplomacy, honesty, passion, rationality, and stoicism. Those are the 10 ways that Obsidian has measured personality and behaviors within the game and how you roleplay your character. And it's really important for priest and paladin characters because how you play a priest or paladin determines a little bit of the strength of some of your abilities. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if you are playing a priest, specifically a priest of, say, the god Berath, you're going to want to align the way your character behaves. Berath, just like any of the gods, has dispositions that it favors and dispositions that it condemns. In the game, for all of them, though we only know of 6 out of the 11, all of the gods have 2 dispositions that they favor and 2 dispositions that they condemn. In the case of Berath, Berath favors rationality and stoic behaviors. When you stop and think about this, this actually lines up really well with Berath. Because Berath is the deity which is overseeing the wheel, which is one of the most vital processes in the Aoran world. And looking at the wheel from a stoic point of view, you really see that death is A, inevitable, so there's nothing you can do to stop it, but also B, there's nothing to be feared about it. It's not like what some people believe in our world, where when you die, it's the end of life. It's not that your life continues on somewhere, it's that life completely stops. It's oblivion, it's annihilation. But in the world of Aora, from a stoic point of view, life continues on after death, and so there is nothing to fear about death. Now, living that out rationally is what priests of Berath aim to do. They look at the world from a Stoic point of view, and then they apply that logical framework rationally to the world. And so if you are playing a priest of Berath in the game, which you can do, you can choose the class priest and the subclass Berath. You are not expected. You can roleplay your character any way you want, but if you play your character in a stoic and rational way, some of your abilities will become stronger as you play the game. And this represents your blessing from Berath. You're living the way Berath would want you to live as a priest of Berath, and so you get these blessings by having increased abilities. Alternatively, though, if you were to act contrary to Berath, then some of those abilities would be weakened. And Berath opposes two dispositions: passion and cruelty. Passion, I understand. Passion and rationality they're not opposites, but they're contrapositives. There's something about each one that looks opposite to the other. It looks contrary. Rationality, thinking rationally and acting rationally, is stopping, analyzing the data, and coming to a conclusion based off of the logic rather than the feeling. Whereas passion is you're so swept up in the moment and how you feel and what's going on that you just act in what feels right. And so it makes sense that Berath would be opposed to passion because of her proclivity towards rationality. A little more tricky, though, to figure out, why is Berath opposed to cruelty? Maybe that's just her nature. Maybe it's just that she doesn't like it when you hurt people. It could just be that. But I do wonder if perhaps cruelty is, in a sense, opposing the stoicism of Berath. Because if you take a look at cruelty, what cruelty is essentially the devaluing of one person compared to yourself. You can't be cruel and punishing to something that you value as much as yourself or even more. It just doesn't work that way. If you are purposely hurting something for the sake of being cruel to it, then you in some way view them or it as less than you. But when you look at the wheel kind of implies an equality to everyone, right? No one comes into this world or leaves this world with any more or less than someone else, and nobody escapes death, and anyone that tries to gets cut down by the Pallid Knight or the Usher, right? There's an equality there that exists. And so being cruel to someone is just like trying to avoid death, in the sense, is it's an affront to the principle behind this natural process. Now, I'm probably reading into it a little bit too much, trying to justify it for the sake of it, but hey, whatever. I mean, it's some speculation, and you got to wonder, why did Berath choose cruelty? Was it just a game designer choice? Did that what they pick out of a hat, or was there a reason for it that we're missing? So as I said, if you're playing a priest of Berath in the game and you decide that you're going to be passionate and cruel, then you're going to find that some of your abilities as a priest are weakened, that they're going to be less effective than they would if you aligned your roleplay towards Berath. Now, I will say that Obsidian does not railroad your character development. If you want to be a priest of a deity and you want to oppose that deity, you can still get to the end of the game. I think that they designed it in such a way that you can notice the difference, but it's not so much that it breaks the game. It's just for impact, and it makes sense. If you were a priest of a deity that had impact in the world and you were behaving in a way that was against that deity, you'd think there would be something that goes on. So this is a way of them including it in the game. Personally, I'm a fan of it, and I hope that they have it for Avowed. I hope that in Avowed, no matter what class you are, you have the option of choosing to align with a deity, which gets you some benefit, but then it means that you have to be more careful with your roleplay. I don't want to see it for just priests. I think it would be good for chanters as well. Priests maybe just have an exaggerated benefit or, negative impact, but regardless, I'm getting sidetracked. So that is how the Berethian priests are expected to behave. And they do generally do that. It is mentioned in the Pillars of Eternity Wikipedia that the priesthood of Berath, people often disdain them because of their obsession with death. People don't like being around that grim topic, and they kind of stay away from priests of Berath. But they are admired by those same people because of their unflinching resolve in the face of death, which is kind of the ultimate test as a priest of Berath, is if you stand face to face with death, are you sure of what you believe? And are you willing to face it down and enter into the wheel into the next life? Now, that's just a little introduction to the priests of Berath. This is a priesthood. It is a religious following. And no religion would be complete without a holy text. And Berath's followers also have their own holy text, aptly named Berethian Scripture. And so if we take a look at the Berethian Scripture, we can read it and get an idea for what it is that these people believe, that they follow this Scripture as a guide for their life and the beliefs that they have. A little heads up, there's a lot of these in DAOs. and thys and whatnot in there. So I'm probably just going to read this from front to back. It doesn't do very well when you have commentary in the middle of it. Behold, thou faithful, the visage of thy transformation. Fear not the journey when the portal opens. Become one with the wheel, with glad heart and cheerful countenance. For the doorway shall open for all in their time. Neither the rich nor the influential, neither kings nor rulers, neither the strong nor powerful can escape its embrace. Berath will usher thee through the doorway, and thou wilt return to life, thy mortal life begun anew. There goest the cycle, there goest life, there thou goest also. Thou shalt approach the door, the inevitable shall approach thee. Do not turn back on the portal, do not turn back on new life. Walk the path and welcome change, or face the night, for he walks the road with thee, and will guide all to their destination. Thou mortal, the skull thou wilt become, thou closed off, the key shalt thou turn. Thou sealed, the threshold thou shalt cross. Thus ending Berithian scripture, as read by Gingerino. All right, so in this scripture, we really see everything that encapsulates what it means to be a priest of Berath. It mentions right at the start, the fear not the journey when the portal opens. And we see multiple times that the portal represents the transference from life to death. It's that moment when you die and your soul is uncoupled from your body and goes into the beyond where the gods are, if you're living in Eora. You're not supposed to fear that journey. In fact, it says that you should have a glad heart and cheerful countenance, because you are continuing this process of the wheel, this thing that Berath is in charge of. By allowing your soul to enter into the wheel, you're, in a sense, contributing your soul to allow it to continue. It's almost like the idea of dollar voting, but with your soul, It mentions the inevitability of death, that nobody is ever able to escape it. It doesn't matter if you're rich or influential, king or ruler, or powerful or weak, it doesn't matter. And so maybe there is a little bit of credit to what we were mentioning earlier about cruelty being valuing yourself over other people. But the wheel says that everyone is equal. Nobody gets out of this alive. Everyone dies at some point, and then everyone also comes back to life at some point. You got to imagine how actually difficult living this life would be. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, yeah, the wheel means that death doesn't really have that same impact as it does in our earth world for a lot of people. It's something that, you die, but the soul will come back. There is life after death. That's still a hard way to live out. You have to live that rationally. There's going to be times when you're face to face with death, and are you going to remain unflinching? Are you going to flinch a little bit? Or are you going to turn tail and run? And also the fact that Berath opposes passion. It's very difficult to discipline your emotions in such a way that they don't determine what you do. A lot of conflict comes up from just people having a feeling or emotion and going with it without taking the time to temper it. But at the same time, some of the highest highs of living life are when you just give into the emotion and you go down the road that you're passionate about. I mean, it's artful passion that made this game in the first place, isn't it? So living life as a Berithian priest is not as easy as it seems. You've got to stand face to face with death unflinchingly, and you have to temper your emotions in such a way that you choose to live rationally. And at all times, you have to be maintaining an equality towards other people. Even though you feel like you have the truth and you in a sense know you have the truth about the wheel and other people aren't living it out, you can't be cruel to them. It's easy to think that you are intellectually or theologically superior to people, perhaps, in this position, but to be cruel to them, even in an underhanded way, would be against the very faith that you're following. And so that's what we know about priests of Berath, what they believe and the God they follow, and how you're supposed to live life. But we're not quite done yet. There is one last piece of Berath that we can talk about, and that are the godlikes. Quick recap on what godlikes are. Godlikes are the 6th race of Eora that are considered the Kith races. The Kith races being the civilized and sentient races of Eora. The godlike are one of those 6 races. But it's kind of weird. They're not really a race in and of themselves. It's almost like a twist on one of the other 5 races. So the other 5 races are human, dwarf, elf, Orlan, and Amawa. And what a godlike is a godlike is one of those 5 races, but the person was blessed by one of the deities. And when they were born, or maybe they grew into it, at one point, they grew into a different physiological appearance than their brethren. So let's say that you had elven parents, but you were blessed by the god Galawain. So you would be born as an elf, perhaps, and you would grow up in the form of an elf. That meaning you would be slender and you would have graceful movement and all that. But your physical appearance to those around you is that of a natural quality, because the god Galawain is the deity of, well, not the deity of nature, but heavily associated with it. You might have vines growing for hair. You might have deer-like ears or even antlers. The lower half of your body could be goat's legs. You'd be like a satyr. You take on a drastically different appearance than those around you. You still had elven parents and you still kind of have an elven form to you, but your physiological traits are much, much different. As well, of course, being a godlike, blessed by one of the gods, you also have a passive trait about you, an aura that you might emit or some special ability that you might have. And in the case of Berath, if you are one of these godlike, you are likely going to be what's called a death godlike. Really ominous, I know. And it doesn't help that the look matches the name. The death godlike are often discriminated against or disdained. People do not like them because of their horrific appearance. You know what? I'm just actually going to read it for you straight off of the text, which you can find in the Pillars of Eternity Wikipedia page, or you can find in the game or in the collector's book. This is the description of a death godlike. The heads of death godlike are almost entirely encased in strange tumorous growths, which often grow in an organic, insectoid-like symmetrical cluster. Their skin and these growths are colored hues of pale purple, pink, and red. Due to their growths, their eyes and other facial features are not visible from the exterior. However, for the godlike, the growths are transparent, allowing them to see through clearly. Their black hair, quote-unquote, is ghostly and flows in a smoke-like manner, growing on the thin places of their head not covered by growths. And so there you have the description of death godlikes. They are these pale, kind of purple-skinned people who have these insectoid-like carapaces over their face. Seriously, it looks like someone ripped the outside of a bug off and glued it to your face. It's absolutely horrifying looking. I'm looking at one of the pictures right now on the Wikipedia page. You can imagine if you ran into a person like this in a metropolis kind of thing where there was a mixture of cultures, maybe you don't worship Berath or you're familiar with Berath, and this person would be horrifying to you. And what's more is, if you do know about them and you know that they're called death godlike, I imagine that there's going to be the natural proclivity to want to stay away from a person like that. One of the most interesting traits of a death godlike, just reading about it, is that these growths that are over their face and eyes are opaque to people looking at a death godlike. But for you, the death godlike, it's transparent. You can see through it. And it's interesting to think what living like that might be like, because on the one hand, you can always make eye contact with other people. You can always have that feeling of social connection in a sense. You can always look a person in their eyes, the windows to their soul, people call it. You can do that, but nobody else can ever do that with you. No one will ever be able to look you in the eye. So they're always going to feel a sense of disconnect from you no matter what. Perhaps the pieces of your face that are showing can show a lot of emotion or expression, but there's still a lot missing there that people can read and connect with. And I imagine that would make you grow up a certain way. Maybe it would force you to become stoic or rational, just like how Berath might want you to be. Wouldn't it be an interesting side quest in Avowed if we had a character who was a death godlike, and they just really wanted to connect with people, but were always finding it difficult? What if we followed their side quest to find a way to make their growths transparent to other people, or at least one other person, so that they could actually look in the eye of someone? That would be a really cool and emotionally heavy side quest. I think that'd be really cool. Now, apart from the physical appearance of the death godlike, they have a passive trait, just like every godlike would. And since death godlike is a playable race in the game, we can actually know what that trait is, and it's called Death's Usher. Death's Usher is essentially the ability that allows you to do more damage to enemies when they are approaching death, which is, really fitting for a death godlike blessed by the god Berath. Because, if you think about it, Berath is really trigger happy when it comes to putting people back into the wheel. And so if you're fighting someone in the game and they're approaching death, like they're getting to that point where you're going to defeat them, it only makes sense for a death godlike that you would hasten that you would bring that about quicker. It's just a small expression of worship towards Berath, I would think. And so that concludes our entire discussion on Berath. In the previous episode, we talked about Berath and what it was. And on this episode, we talked more about who it is and the priesthood that follows it and what that might mean living that in a realistic way, as well as the godlikes that are, quote unquote, blessed. I thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a rating and review. It helps me get better, as well as help other people to find this podcast. If you want to reach out to me, ask a question, or be featured on the show, or just say anything, you can find me on Twitter at World of Aora. Or you can email me, worldofaora@gmail.com. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.